conversation. We're discussing educational developments in Nigeria at 60.
Welcome back. This is Good Morning Nigeria, live on the network service of the NTA. In the mood of the Nigeria at 60, that is, we are taking a look at educational development post-independence. And to ease our guests into the discussion, there is a brief background from Abdulsalam Jubril.
According to the American human rights activist Malcolm X, education is the passport to the future, for tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it today. No doubt, education is a very vital part of human welfare and existence, and experts say that it is the best legacy a country can give her citizen. In fulfillment of this legacy, Nigeria over the last 60 years has implemented various educational policies, and her educational system underwent a lot of changes to improve its quality. Based on this, the country experienced different systems of education, namely the traditional, colonial, 654 and the 6334 system of education, which is the educational system still in use currently. Nigeria introduced the 6334 system in 1989 because its purpose is to achieve 21st century education needs, and for an education system to meet the needs of the 21st century, it needs to focus on both technology and academic-driven education with good implementation to prepare students for the challenges of the world. While these systems are laudable, several factors have contributed towards making the educational system in Nigeria perform below standard over the years. These include poor funding, poor educational infrastructures, inadequate classrooms and teaching aids, outdated curriculum, lack of laboratories and research facilities, as well as dichotomy between polytechnic and university education, among others. In recent times also, vocational and technical education has been emphasized as necessary for gainful employment, as well as acquisition of basic educational foundation. But lack of funding, unavailability of technical schools and tutors has contributed to the inability of the sector to achieve this goal. As Nigeria gears up to celebrate 60 years of independence, what measures should be adopted towards enhancing the educational sector and improving the quality of education among Nigerians? What is the way forward for Nigerians' educational sector? Experts will throw more light on these issues and more in a moment.
Many thanks, Abdulsalam, for that backgrounder. We have three guests with us this morning, one here in the Abuja studios. So let's welcome Professor Ishaq Oloyede. He's Registrar, Joint Admissions and Matriculations Board. He's also been Vice Chancellor, University of Ilorin. Professor Oloyede, pleasure to have you with us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Also with us in this conversation this morning, joining us via Zoom from Okebukola, that's the Ogun State capital. We'd like to welcome Professor Peter Okebukola. That's right, you can see him there on the right side of your screen. He's the current chairman of council of the National Open University now, former vice chancellor of Lagos State University, and also former executive secretary of the National Universities Commission. Professor Okebukola, pleasure to have you with us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much. Pleasure is mine. Thank you.
And joining us, from our Benin studio is Professor Lilian Salami, Vice Chancellor, University of Benin. Thank you so much, Professor, for joining us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much for having me. Good morning.
Thank you so much.
All right. Professors, pleasure to have you all three with us this morning, and happily, all three of you arrived before Nigeria's independence, and so you had the benefit of the educational system. Sometimes when we feel romantic about the past, we say the system really was good. And you are still, of course, now involved in the management of aspects of our educational system. With the Skype connections, Skype or Zoom connections still very clear, let's begin this conversation from Abeokuta with Professor Peter Okebukola. Professor Okebukola, let's just make this like a personal narrative. From your experience, what is it that you have observed about Nigeria's educational system since independence?
Thank you very much, Dr. Kingsley Osadolo, and all members of the, I can see you smiling there, all members of the Good Morning Nigeria crew. I want to appreciate this program, very educative. I'd like to congratulate all Nigerians on the 60th anniversary of independence. Many Nigerians, especially those who are active in the social media, what they want to hear now is that, you see, the educational system in Nigeria has completely collapsed. Our schools are the worst in the world. Our teachers are the worst. Students, our results, everything. But I want to give empirical truth. I want to start by start my assessment with what I consider to be empirical truth. Empirical truth will mean data-backed conclusions. Yes, we have what you can call a normal curve in the progression of education in Nigeria, where you have some good parts in our development, some very bad parts in our development, and in the middle, what you can consider to be fair. In 1960, we had an education system which catered to, if you like the expression, catered for smaller people. And we had teachers who were more committed. We had students who were more committed. And the products of that system were judged to be good. Now, walk along with me 10 yearly, every 10 years. And you find there are bad spots, if you like, potholes along the way. There are expressways, there are clean, bitumen, very good roads on the side. So we're talking about this normal curve. You see, if you look at the major indicators of educational progress, since we're asking us to assess performance, there are over 200 of such indicators, but you can cluster into access. So how have we done from 1960 to date with regard to access? If you look at access indicators are also group. You have what you call adult literacy rate. In 1960, adult literacy rate was 67.3. Today is 75.1. So we've made some progress. Mind you, as I continue with this segment of my narration, I'm not saying that we are there yet. We still have a long road to travel. Let's take primary gross enrollment rate. The gross enrollment rate is the proportion of children who should be in primary school who are there regardless of age. You can check out my statistics, you can check out my data. In 1960, we had a primary gross enrollment rate of 69.2. Today, it is 84. If you look at secondary gross enrollment rate, in 1960s was 36. Today is 42. And the tertiary gross enrollment rate in 1963 was 6.3. Today is 18.16. So we made some progress along the access front. What about equity? There are, let me just pick one of the indicators. That's gender parity, the proportion of boys and girls in school. Check out the statistics. Nigeria stands out as having about number of boys and girls at the basic education level. So we have gender parity there. If you come to secondary education, almost there. If you come to our universities, we're almost there. So on gender parity, on equity, we are good on gender parity. And let me take, now that my boss, Professor Oluide, is here, now let me look at the matter of equity regarding disadvantaged people at the university level. This is a man who is globally renowned. and of governance, excuse me. He has established a scheme for getting blind people and others who are disadvantaged to get into universities. So have that scheme. So we are moving on that front. Now let's leave access and go to quality. This is where, because I heard the background about issues related to quality, this is where we have some challenge. And if you are in your father's farm and you say, oh, your father's farm is the best or is the worst, and you have not seen the others, then you will be prejudiced in your judgment. I have seen other farms in the whole of Africa. I've been to most African countries, studied the education system. I've studied the education system globally, and I'm pleased to let you know that we don't present the worst case scenario. It is bad. It's bad regarding quality, but it's the same thing out there. Can you show me in the United States? Can you tell me in the United States that we do not have bad quality schools, bad quality teachers, bad quality products? We do. So on the quality front, we have not done as well as we should do, but we are making some steady progress. Now let's take the process front. The process front is how you take in the input, how you process inputs, process them to get a product. That is, the graduate from your basic secondary school or from our universities. The processing has a lot of challenge, and the challenge over the years from 1960 to date has kept depressing. In other words, you have a situation where you get into a class, you find that the teacher is poorly prepared. You have huge teacher capacity deficit compared to what we used to have in the past. We have strikes that we don't have in the past, interrupting the academic calendar. And the University of Ilorin, you mentioned it, that Professor Olede was vice chancellor, stood out, because I don't think the same is true now, stood out as a university with uninterrupted academic calendar. So over time, to summarize, from 1960 to date, we have seen the good side, we have seen the bad side, and we have seen the very ugly side. And today, interplaying within our very eyes, we have very, very good exemplars of quality in our education system. If not, why are Americans coming to look for our doctors? Why are Americans coming to look for our professors? Why do we have the British coming to engage our doctors? Any Nigerian to go study in the U.S., you'll find that in summary, as I close this session, I think we have done well, but we still have a long, long road to travel. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Professor. We thank you for those sharing information and some pertinent questions you've raised. We want to go through with our guest on this issue of assessment, Professor Lilian Salami. Taking cue from, Professor Peter Okebukola, what's your personal assessment of Nigeria's development educationally, given the fact that, as Kingsley said, you all came before Nigeria? And let's see how it was before Nigeria and then how you went through it to this present moment. Let's try to be as brief as possible, because we may not be able to do justice to this topic if we are going to take it that too long. Go ahead, Lilian.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Of course, every period has its own peculiarity. At the independence, of course, what happened was the government believed so much that education was the instrument for national development, and so actually provided services, basic quality infrastructure, and of course that motivated the students at that time, and so we had a good output. Again, looking at that time, we didn't have the issues that we have today. We didn't have population issues like we have today. So it was good then. But as time went on, we started having issues with population, poor funding, and then that continued, as Professor Okebukola has said. Yes, we've had bumpy rides. And so, but today, and I want to emphasize where we are today really, is that we have really very serious issues. Issues that has to do with policy instability. Our policies are right, yes, they are there, but sometimes driving them becomes a problem. And the major problem, and I'm sure this has almost become like a recurring incident or a recurring discussion, is the poor funding that we have. So no matter what your policies are, no matter what your intentions are, if you don't have funds to drive these policies, we will not get to where we actually need to be. Now, you take a university, for instance, and I speak from the fact that I'm a current vice chancellor. My senior colleagues there were once there, but I am here today. And so I can speak from where we are today. Now, you look at infrastructure. You look at motivation of teachers, lecturers. You look at motivation for even our own students, their students. They are almost not there. And that, again, is because of poor funding. So when we begin to talk, yes, we've had, compared to independence or pre-independence, that Nigeria had good educational system. Yes, because then funding wasn't a problem. But now we have the population, we have low funding, and so we'll continue to have these issues. Unless, of course, that is a major thing that must be addressed. And if you don't plunge enough money or put enough money into the educational system, really it is going to be what goes in comes out. So if you need quality, you must drive quality. So in terms of policies, like I have said, our issues most times isn't policy or the development of policies, but implementing them. And then, of course, we have depth of issues in our university from, like I said, infrastructural decay, motivation for students and staff members, and so it's going to be difficult to actually get such output. Yes, we are doing the best that we can do for what is available, but we are really not doing what we ought to, or we're not going to get where we ought to be if we continue in this direction. So I think I'll rest my case there and then continue as time goes on.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor Salami. Let's come back to Abuja studios, Professor Oloyede. Professor Oloyede, since independence in 1960, Nigeria's educational development. So far, so what?
Let me start by saying that the oracle has spoken. And it's to Professor Okebukola I rush every time when I need statistics, current hot state statistics. A couple of days ago, I woke him up, and because I was writing a paper, and I said, Prof, I needed gross enrollment ratio, current one. And he said, okay, from the oven, I'm going to give you August, the Unesco release for August 2020. He had to provide, and I think he had given sufficient statistics. I believe that today we have problems, and we are looking at the problem, and the problems are not allowing us to even see the prospects. The real issue is that there was no planning when we ought to plan for education. For so many years, we did not plan for what we have today. And the problems became so many that even when you put in so much, the input becomes insignificant, because for so many years now we can even not plan for the future, because the current problems are so overwhelming that if you want to plan for next year, somebody will say, what will I eat today before tomorrow? The Yorubas will say, dry meat, when you fry it properly, it's very sweet. But there must be something you have to put in your mouth while the frying is going on. This problem is that now there is a real problem that we are still battling with how to exist in the present, that we are also damaging tomorrow. Because what we are blaming those people for not doing, we are already doing now by not planning for tomorrow. We are now battling the present situation that we cannot. And under this confusion, what happens is that we will even forget the good ideas. I want to thank Professor Okebukola, my mentor, for his analysis. When I was the president of the Association of African Universities, I had the privilege of going around Africa, at least among other places in the world, and to be involved in assessment. And I appreciated Nigeria. I would look at what was going on. I got to a country that I met some Nigerians. I had to call all Nigerian students in the place. I want you to tell me, why are you here? Why are you going through this torture for education? Why are you here? And they gave reasons. Part of the reasons is that they did not meet the requirement at home, and some of them claiming that they wanted to just leave home, they want to travel abroad. You couldn't get us. Few of them will say, yes, I want to study medicine, and I couldn't get a place. I want to read law and so on. The situation is that if we know what is going on elsewhere, we will thank God for what we have. But that does not mean that we have already arrived. Poor planning is one of the issues. The second issue, my sister, Professor Salami, mentioned the issue of funding. I agree that we are being underfunded. But even the little we have, the little funding we have, how are we managing the funds? Yes, we seem to think about the future. When I was at the University of Ibadan in 1976, not only that we were living like kings, the laundry services will even be provided for us. They will come every week, 8 pieces of dress we will get, and so on. Again, it's a problem of time. When I became Vice Chancellor of the University of Ilorin, that is talking about funding. Yes, the funding is poor, but we need to be innovative. When I became Vice Chancellor of the University of Ilorin, the day I was announced, my target was I will restore that university to what it was when I was a student. I wasn't intending making it better. I felt that the university must not be worse than it was when I was a student of that university. And I went out just struggling to make sure that no student will come out of that university that will be worse in terms of comfort, in terms of education, than I enjoyed when I was there. So my own suggestion is that, yes, it has been so far so fair. It may not be as perfect as we want, but globally, things are getting not as good as they used to be. And therefore, when we have the opportunity of going out, I took a class in UK. I went as an external examiner recently, and I got all the students in the class. And I said, okay, those of you who I want to know those of you who graduated from Nigeria university system. And they brought them. And when I looked, not only my own scores, the scores of other lecturers, when I compared, the Nigerian graduates of Nigeria university were on top. That's why the fact that one of them that I taught here was not my best student. But it happened to in UK in a class that he was one of the topmost, and they were even praising me for being one of those who taught that person. And that person was not in the A grade when he was in Nigeria. So the point I'm making is that things are not as good as they ought to be, but we get ourselves involved too much in self-destruct that we will even forget that we are making progress. When Professor Alele Williams was the Vice Chancellor where my sister is now in Benin, you know how we were celebrating her? That, because it was a magic, that given the oppression and so on, that a woman could emerge. How many women do we have now? They are even threatening us. Almost all the registrars of universities are women. The vice chancellors there are many. One of them was is my sister now. So the point I'm making is that we are making progress. But if we allow ourselves to be overwhelmed by the situation, we will not even see the little efforts we are making. I believe that there are problems. We talk of corruption. Corruption is everywhere. I am praying that the level of examination malpractice in Nigeria will be arrested and will not grow as it is in UK or in US, because we are still at the child play level when it comes to examination malpractice, when you see what others are doing now. So the point I'm making is that let's start and combat the evil so that our evil will not grow. And let's also improve on what we are doing so that we can make more progress. But to say that we have stagnated or we are not doing as much, I think we are not appreciating what God has given to us. That's my position.
Well, truly speaking, Professor Olayode, the facts you've been given, expresses the opinion that you've been so honest enough with the system. At least you've been part of it. You've told us exactly how bad it has been and how the confused situation it is at the moment. I want to put it to Professor Peter Okebukola to respond to this. The situation at the moment seems to be a little bit confused, as Olayode said, given the fact that Oloyode, that is, given the fact that we've been trying to, as much as possible, move forward, but what we have on the ground seems to be cloud our own thinking and our opinion about the progress we're making. Unfortunately, we don't seem to see the progress. You painted some fine picture earlier on of how good the system is, but still there are potholes, you said.
Yes, I'm not sure correct. I want to underline all that Professor Ishaq Oloyede said about allowing the bush to becloud our vision of the road. We have challenges. Yes, we have challenges in funding. We have challenges in teacher capacity. We have challenges in infrastructure, challenges with regard to strikes. I think what will be, I'm sorry to make the proposal, but I think it's important, rather than bemoan, spend half the time bemoan all the challenges. Let's take the lead from what Professor Olayede said. Let's look at how we can clear the bush. What are the ahead of us? How can we put down or demolish the obstacles? But I must say something rather quick. I heard at the beginning of the program about this 26% of UNESCO, that UNESCO has prescribed 26% of the funding or the proportion of funding for education. That's a myth that I want to bust. There is no UNESCO document that says that any country should appropriate or spend 20% of its budget on education. None whatsoever. You only hear that in the Nigerian literature. You don't hear it anywhere else. I've done quite some consultancies for the UN, for you. I know so what all these organizations are saying, AU, UN, is that appropriately fund your educational system. So the matter of the 6% does not arise. And I also want to say that money is a necessary condition, but not a sufficient condition. Just like Professor Olayede said, throw money, triple, quadruple the amount of money going to education today, you can't be guaranteed of the product being tripled or quadrupled. You can't. The reason being that, just like Professor Olayede said, you see the efficiency, prudence in managing our resources, financial resources in this case, is called to question. You can see the case in JAM. So there are, I want to emphasize this, there are several variables that interplay in the quality of education. So if you are looking for good quality secondary school products, good quality university products, there are several things. You see, let's take the university system. The quality of students coming from a basic education system is one of such variables. So if you put in bad quality products for the basic education system into the university system, you have a high chance getting poor quality products. If you have, so we have student variables, we have teacher variables. Let me just quickly summarize in this: teacher variables, student variables, parent variables. So you are saying put money in education, pour all the money in education. And then you find parents who will go and buy question papers for students, parents who are indisciplined, making their not giving home training and discipline and good moral values to their students or to their children coming to school. Yeah, the thing don't get K-leg with that. And if you took teachers who, although are well paid and are still they still go on strike, then the price dimension is also warped. And I'm sad to say that many of our teachers are poorly paid, especially in private schools. You will not imagine that in Lagos, in private schools in Lagos, a graduate teacher, even some with a master's degree, will earn just 25,000 naira a month. So what kind of delivery, what kind of enthusiasm, what kind of motivation, what kind of would we expect that teacher to deliver? So what I think we must do is to look at the entire thing in totality. Anybody who comes to me to say that funding is the challenge, I'll just tell that person that just scratching the surface. There are several other things that we'll need to do. Funding will do a lot of things, but funding is not a sufficient condition. It's only a necessary condition.
All right, Professor Okebukola, thank you very much. I we really appreciate your correction of that myth, or busting of that myth of 26% of the nation's budget being stipulated for investment in education. It's been around for many years now, and you are also probably aware that the myth grows usually in proportion to the intensity of the aluta being pursued by ASU members mostly, to say 26%, that. You're asking yourself, and then oftentimes when they are making the comparison, they take a look at the federal government's budget. Nobody looks at the state government budget. Nobody looks at the budget for local governments and see what are the indices there. But thanks a lot for your perspective that you brought. We'll return to you. But let's go back to Professor Salami. Professor Salami, still on the point, excuse me, raised by Professor Oloyede with regard to our being somewhat beclouded now by current existential challenges that we are sometimes even unable to see the prospects out there. To say, yes, there are current challenges, but it looks like a typical Nigerian thing. Everybody wants a solution here and now. And if that solution doesn't come, it's like the entire house is collapsing. And yet, from what we get to know from anecdotes, graduates of Nigerian institutions take off from our shores, and when they get abroad, top countries, OECD countries, they excel. What exactly are we not looking at? Are we too pessimistic in evaluating ourselves that we don't even have a sense of optimism to say, let's look at the bright spots and then ramp up those bright spots?
No, definitely. I think if you look at our system, I, for instance, schooled in the United States of America, and I remember that Nigerians were topping our classes, whether it was science or mathematics or wherever, we're all topping. So nobody has said that our outputs are not are globally marketable. They are. But what we are saying that we can do much, much better. I, for instance, when I took up this job, University of Benin, I had, of course, my own pillars that I was going to drive to get the university to be a better university than the one I met. And of course, I have been driving those pillars. So yes, we have to be innovative. Yes, we have to be creative. Yes, we have to look at other means of actually motivating our students, motivating our lecturers, so that their outputs can really be measurable to the global standards. We have said that. But when my elder, Professor Okebukola, keeps saying that money may not be all that we need to emphasize, but I also think from my own experiences so far, that money is a major factor here. Now we know there are leakages. We also know that the corruption is not just in the institutions. In fact, it cuts across, just as he has said, parents' input into the educational system, the students, societal values and all of that. Yes, we know. But no matter how strong these pillars are that you want to put in place to drive the educational system, there is, an instrument, or there is a propelling factor, and that propelling factor we cannot run away from. I do realize that finance and funding has become a very critical issue that we begin to discuss every time, because the house is no longer holding forth, and therefore we must begin to look at other ways. But I've also emphasized that institutional institutes of higher learning, or institutions of higher learning, are not just there to drive other, aspects as a way of getting funds into the system. That we cannot become sellers of items that are not necessarily our core mission. And so our core mission is, of course, research, teaching, knowledge, delivery, as well as international output. But while we are doing that, sometimes we are beclouded by other responsibilities so that we can drive the system by funding or raising funds from other places. For instance, I have tried as much as possible now to liaise a lot with or have a strong relationship with my alumni, so that, yes, they can assist us, because we know that coming from the center, we are no longer getting enough to drive the system. So what I'm trying to say is, yes, we have all the pillars, we have all the innovations, we have all the desires to drive the system. But there must be something that drives this system and can drive this system effectively. And again, that is funding. So yes, I do agree that it may not be the means to the end that we need to get to, but it is a strong means. So we cannot run away from that. And of course, that is where my own perspective, that yes, we have all the ideas that we have, but we must have funds to drive these ideas. And from my experiences, I think that is a very major one. So nobody says we are not trying. We're doing the best that we can, but our best really isn't giving the outputs that most of us would want. We still produce students that actually can compete anywhere. A child who probably goes through computer education, and I'm not saying just University of Benin, I'm sure some others, if we want to be true to ourselves, may not actually have computers to play around with. And that is because you can't get computer available to these students, because we don't have enough to buy. And this is just an example. So we can sit here and say, yes, we are going to produce good computer students, we are going to produce first classes in that area, and yet you do not have access to the common input that the student needs to get to that level. Then it becomes, we're just, standing on the same pot and jumping and not moving forward. So that is my own, thinking that we need to do more. Yes, we are trying to do more, but we also need to have that driven.
Well, Professor Lillian, thank you so much for that analysis. Let me come back to Abuja studio and then meet Professor Ishak, and let's see, look at what you've said earlier on. You've gone around a lot of countries, really, and been at the center of the education enterprise, and I've seen a lot. Your explanations seem to point to the fact that Nigerians are doing very well and extremely good everywhere they go. But when we come back home, I really want to ask you, because you've been a vice chancellor, at least you're heading an institution now that looks at students in Nigeria and their performances. What is the problem with the environment here, given the fact that here it seems as if a lot is not being seen as being achieved, rather a lot more is being seen as being achieved outside?
Thank you very much. I am worried myself at times when we talk about ourselves. There are problems, but I know that there are peculiar problems with us, which we need to address. At times, we allow inhibitions. We create problems for ourselves, and we complain against the problems. If an institution, talk of a university, talk of University of Benin or University of Abuja or University of Ilorin or any university in Nigeria, there are rules. But at times we create some rules, or we made the society, we are talking about 26%. It's very difficult for anybody in Nigeria to believe there was no 26% elsewhere. There are issues we should be innovative. We should dare the system. That's the way I'm looking at it. Because the environment here, we have created some imaginary problems for ourselves. I give an example. When we were to start mass communication at the University of Ilorin, we knew that we didn't have the system, just as Professor Salami had rightly said about no computer. We sat down at Senate and we said, look, if we must start mass communication, what do we need? We say, okay, we need so, we need this, we need that. Every student of mass communication must have a computer to himself or to herself. We say, good. We sat down at Senate, we look at all the instructions from government, whether there is any inhibition. Hey, government said you should not charge for this. Government said, okay, let's look at all the instructions. We look at all the instructions, and Senate came up with a decision that anybody who is admitted to the University of Ilorin, in addition to any other charge that he may have, he must have a computer. And because we are conscious of the fact that not many parents could afford it, say, yes, if you can afford it, you will buy and come with one, which you are going to use throughout your 4-year program. But for those who cannot afford, you deposit 25,000 every year. At that time, we calculated it to be about 100,000. 25,000 per annum. And when you are going at the end of your program, you go with your computer. So right from, there was no mass communication student that came to the University of Ilorin. There were hues and cries. Oh, government may react. No government. No minister talked to us about it. Rather, they were even praising us for it. So at the end of the day, we told the students, if you can bring your own, bring your computer, and if you have your computer, if your father can afford it, 100,000. If your father cannot afford it, we bought the computer with university money, and 25,000 was being returned. When external auditors came and they said, oh, you gave it was a loan, because we had to pay for it. Because we bought it, it came to about 84,000 naira, and therefore if you have saved about 16,000, these candidates are going to pay 100,000, so your interest has even come back. So what I'm saying is that the environment here creates some imaginary problems for us, that things that we can, some people said university, federal government directed that hostel should be 90 naira. I don't know where that instruction came from. At the University of Ilorin, I think up to today, they have free hostel. You have hostel like Yusuf Ali hostel there that is completely free. If you would know that, you will clean out. The hostel was built by a philanthropist and he wanted it to be free. If you are certified to be very poor, you have free hostel. But we graduated it. We had 100,000 per session, and even more, owned by the university, and you tell you, if you want 45,000, this is it, and so on. So what I'm saying in effect is that some of the inhibitions we put on ourselves and some of the things that we think we cannot do, if you are appointed to a position, my own position is that anybody who wants to say, don't collect money for this, must provide that service. Rather than ruining the situation, what we should have is there should be cost sharing. What I believe is one of our problems here is that maybe you think that government says tuition should be free. Okay, tuition should be free. We all agree. But if there are essential facilities to be procured, as necessary facilities, we should find a way of getting the parents, particularly those who can, this private sector, to fund those things and make those things happen. In other places where we point at, the private sector pump a lot of money into. For instance, I give you, if you go to UK, UCAS, equivalent of JAM, so that performed, if you know what UCAS is doing for education in UK. So if I had that as my own model, so why would JAM not be able to pump part of the resources that we are getting into the education sector to make the education sector better? rather than sitting down and lamenting that, oh, this the thing. But of course, we have inhibition that you can't transfer because of National Assembly had not budgeted and so on. But if you now keep those money and you return it into the national post and demand from the national post that enough, a large chunk of this should be pumped back, and we are talking again, there is no money. At the prelude to this discussion, somebody said there are 23 parastatals arguing for more funding. But among these 23, you have Third Fund, you have JAMB, you have NECO. So are they supposed to be liability on the nation? So they are supposed to be part of the problem, part of the solution rather than the problem. So the point I'm making is that, yes, we have problems, but the self-made problems are many. And there are problems within our purview that we can solve on our own to put the education forward.
Professor Loide, thank you very much for your perspective. We'll return presently to the issue of oversight bodies and what they could do, as well as solving the problems. I just wanted to return to Professor Okebukola. Professor Okebukola, as part of, shall we say, clearing the bush so that we can see further and further, let's return again to what you said at the beginning, your quadrant of assessment. You talked about access, you talked about equity, that's to say gender parity, quality and process. I want to focus on gender parity. As you said, and of course echoed by the others, if we don't look back, we probably would not know how far we have come. In terms of gender parity, it used to be the case. I mean, even when I was in elementary school, you had very few girls who were in class. By the time you moved up, you know, it's fewer girls still. And mostly it tended to be this case that girls had certain professions or certain channels of life marked out for them. So you go and learn sewing. They want to now call fashion design. Go and learn sewing. Or best case scenario, you go to commercial school so that you can become a secretary. Unfortunately, it was also the case that if any of them got knocked up, as Americans would say, if any of them got pregnant, that was the end of the education for that particular individual. They say, go and marry the person that did this to you. But things are changing for us. What are the factors that have brought this about from your analysis, and how can we ramp up those factors? Because there is a saying that educate a woman and then you build a nation.
I'm very delighted that you are able to give us some examples of progress made rather than lamenting. We should count our blessings and say we have moved positively on this part. On the matter of gender equity and the factors that are responsible for pushing up, driving up the ratio of the women folk or the girls or the females to match that of the males. There are quite a number of them. The first thing to note is what are the factors that are bringing them back. Chief of that is sociocultural. Sociocultural will mean that there are some ideas in our culture that will say, oh, you are a girl, you can't do science. You are a girl, you should go and learn how to sew and things like that. So things are changing because of increased literacy. Our parents are getting more aware, and even if the parents are in the rural areas, there are others in the urban centers that are able to influence the decisions of those in the rural areas. So we are having a pulling down of such socio-cultural impediments. The second is that in the population, that statistic now, the chances of the women going into the same profession as the men will increase on account of that demographic change. The other is like policy. We have a policy that states that you should enroll 60% of your students in the sciences and 40% in the arts. There's some maybe written policy that enroll more girls. And you have that. And I move away from girls to the matter of those who are physically challenged. Professor Kolide, if a blind candidate or a candidate who has some challenge scores the same, good score in the UTME, he will insist that, oh, you have this blind candidate that has scored this in University of Lagos. Why are you not taking the person? So there are some actions by people in government that are making that to move. But I must underline the fact that aside from, as part of the sociocultural, there are some societies in our nation that believe in the men not going to school too much, go and learn and all of that. And the girls, should go to school. So we're having that kind of balance. And so moving forward, we must strengthen all those actions that we are taking now to pull down the sociocultural barriers, to get women like Professor Lilian Salami, like role models for girls to get into education, to higher education, to study all that, and to encourage people like Professor Isha, keep doing the good things they are doing. So, and we must continue to break down the sociocultural barriers. Two, we must continue to incentivize people.
It seems you have a challenge there with the network. We'll now take a short break. We'll be back with Good Morning Nigeria, talking about Nigeria at 60, educational development. Please stay with us. Welcome back. We thank you so much for being part of this show. And of course, we've been talking about Nigeria at 60, educational development. That's the focus this morning. We'll now take some tweets that have come in so that we get to see the public perspective of discussion we're doing here. Chris Simeon said, presently Nigeria's educational sector suffers serious bottlenecks. Government at all levels, as well as relevant stakeholders, should rise up and fix the sector by providing necessary facilities for the sake of future generations.
Usman Banu Kanto tweet says the educational system since independence has been at a crossroads. Notable challenges in the sector include inconsistent policies and programs, poor funding, population explosion, paucity of quality teachers, and infrastructure.
But Masi Haruna Adamu says the education system in Nigeria has been walloping and galloping. In fact, it is depreciating every second. We need a total overhaul of the system.
Jones Ferrari, that's the handle there. It says we need to implement ICT and skills acquisition alongside other forms of instruction. That's how China and the rest of the first world made it. Thus far, the country has been producing jobless graduates for lack of skills. So the country has been producing. Are you jobless yourself?
Utulo Sunday says Nigeria at 60 is no longer a child. A lot have been achieved in the educational sector, but more needs to be done, especially in the area of infrastructural development to meet international standards.
Francis Obi, towards making the educational sector vibrant, more funds should be allocated to the sector. Also, private individuals and corporate organizations should give scholarships and sponsorships to brilliant students in furthering their education. And by the way, let's just address some of these points that are coming up while we wait for our esteemed guests to further elaborate on them. We used to have, there used to be scholarships in this country, and there are still scholarships. There used to be bursaries. Some of us were beneficiaries of this when we went to school. So it so happens that, unfortunately, state governments withdrew from funding those bursaries. Some state governments still do. At some point in this country also, students from certain parts of the country were virtually on unemployment. In other words, you earned a certain salary while you were a student, and upon graduation, you had a job waiting for you there. But of course, population explosion has virtually impacted a lot of this. And there was also a time in this country for teacher training students or pupils, as they are called. If you were your final year, you earned some allowance. That was towards the production of teachers that would implement the UPE, that was Universal Primary Education System. All right, so let's continue, Yusuf.
It says Chukunon, so that is on the handle Jamboree 25. In the developed world, education and health are more sacrosanct and the personnel are highly paid. Why isn't it so in Nigeria? This is one of the reasons education is somehow neglected here.
Mike Ayakwa says Nigeria is respected the world over because of her quantitative and qualitative education of our citizens over the past years. This can be seen empirically with the number of institutions we have today, right up to tertiary levels.
Yunusa Idris says, sincerely speaking, we are left behind in the education sector compared to our sister countries. Decaying infrastructure, dilapidated theaters and lecture halls, overcrowded hostels, poor remunerations for lecturers, incessant strikes due to poor condition of services, etc., have contributed to the dilapidation of the educational sector.
Abdul Rauf, that's the handle, says we need to stop subsidizing tertiary education. Federal government should hands off most universities, also sound, subsidized and compulsory secondary and technical education should be encouraged.
And Suleiman Babagana says traditional leaders frequent inspection and visitation of schools is found in colonial era is minimal or no longer being carried out. This tends to motivate teachers as they are given a sense of belonging, thereby ensuring optimum performance. Kinsley, this is a very pertinent point here being made. And of course, when we look back the years through when we were students or other peoples as such, there were inspectors, school inspectors, and of course they go around at random at no time, and whatever they see, they record and try to take action on that. I would want us to start from here before we get down to what I issues. Let's respond to some of these tweets. Professor Ishak, let's pick on from there.
Yes, inspectors. Let me start by saying, as far as I'm concerned, the difference in quality between public and private institutions in Nigeria is monitoring. Despite the fact that relatively the staff of private institutions are poorly paid compared with public institutions, they perform better because of monitoring. It appears monitoring has gone down in public space. In the past, inspectors, people want to be posted to inspectorate divisions. I don't know what's happening now, but some 4 or 5 years ago when I made my last check, those people who are useless, the system would not want, that would be posted to the inspectorate division. To the extent that someone will say, they don't like me, they have posted me to inspection. And the man posted to inspection has no vehicle to move around to go and see what is expected to inspect. No fuel fund is provided for him to go and inspect where he's going to be to inspect. No facility is, even when you see the inspector, the way he himself will dress, the people he's going to inspect will pity him and know that he needs some money to be made to be comfortable. So inspection is one of the issues that I believe we need to relay, because monitoring is not there, particularly in public institutions. We need to actually monitor. The second aspect of it, which somebody addressed about funding, is cost sharing. I believe that we'll be deceiving ourselves if we keep on saying we will have enough fund from the public for our education. Makerere University that you mentioned, I always talk about Makerere formula. Makerere formula was simply that at a time Makerere University was totally grounded, and there came Professor Zembufu at that time, who became the vice chancellor, and he came up with an idea. There is 100 space for medicine, for instance. We will take only 50 out of the 500. The 50 we are going to take will be those people who perform very well, but their parents are poor. If you perform very well, but your parents are rich, by investigation, you will not fall into it. You pick the poor people 50. Then the other 50, you now charge 200% of the fee, because we know that your parents, and it brings out to say the pass mark is no longer 250. 250 for those who are going to be public institutions, but we'll take as low as 200
for those who can afford, and then it charges 200%, so that the 500, the 50 that were brought in from the rich will pay for the 50 from the poor. And that's how Makerere University was resuscitated. I believe that there is need for cost sharing. If we believe those rich people who have enough money to send their children to UK, to America, to everything, and when they come back, even in Nigeria, they send their children to fee-paying institutions. So if those people, if they should not be struggling with the poor in the public institutions, I think we should have appropriate fees charged for those who can afford it. And of course, it's easy to identify those who can afford it. You know them by the type of primary school. If you attended a primary school where your school fees is more than 100,000 per semester, you attended a secondary school where you pay 3 million, 4 million at secondary school, you now come to the university and they say pay 90,000. Which 90,000? So I believe that those who can afford should be, cost sharing is another aspect that I think we should address. And the third thing, in my own view, that I think we should look at about what is happening is the reward system. The poor is poor. Not everybody will be rich. The rich will be rich, yes. The poor should not envy the rich, because otherwise it will collapse at the end of the day. But the rich should not be, should not flaunt the wealth. For example, a director in the Ministry of Education, after 20, 25 years in service, will not earn up to 1/50 of what a director in NNPC or in Central Bank earns. They are working for the same government. They have the same salary. There is disparity. The disparity is so wide. And you don't want to preach to this poor director the only misfortune was that he went to the Ministry of Education, while this one went to Ministry of Finance and got to Central Bank. So if you have gone to Central Bank, yes, we do not envy you, but you should not earn more than 10 times what the ordinary your colleagues will earn. But what you now have is a situation that because you have gone to Central Bank, to NNPC, to all this, where all these rich people push their own children and they allow our own children to go to the public service. Where they go, there is a wide disparity. Go and see what they earn and compare it with what people in public service. We need to adjust this imbalance to make things work.
I know, Professor Lloyd, that's a live issue, and the Salaries and Wages Commission is often invited to look into this matter. But it appears that not much traction has been gained in terms of bridging the disparity. It wouldn't be a question of saying, okay, let's also escalate the earnings of the others who are in, shall we say, the line ministry. If you need to crash whatever those other persons in those parastatals or agencies are earning, that would be a fine point. The other issue with regard to fee disparity on the basis of perceived affluence, you can be certain that you have litigation on that, and persons are going to be quoting Chapter 4 of the Constitution with regard to discrimination on that. But let's return to Professor Lilian Salami. Professor Lilian Salami, one aspect again of what Professor Okebukola raised in his assessment, he was talking about process. And under that process rubric, we have quality of inputs, that is the students who come into the institution. Then you have the challenges, of course, with basic education and secondary education. But I also want us to focus on, say, on the quality of teachers. In this case, at the tertiary level, being universities for our particular conversation. There is the widespread view that after the hemorrhage that the institutions of higher learning suffered in this country on account of the introduction of the structural adjustment program, that's the so-called brain drain, the universities were, as it were, left with not necessarily the very best. And unfortunately, that would seem to have been compounded over the years. So even in terms of their attitude and disposition, you do not appear to have the very best amongst those who are supposed to be imparting knowledge at that level. And that this has sometimes also affected the quality of some of the graduates who get produced. If you agree with this point of view, what then would you suggest as a way forward? This probably is unfair or uncharitable. Some say that amongst those who drive all this agitation, strike, are probably amongst those who are not among the very best. So what can be done to improve the quality of your teaching staff in the universities and therefore invariably impact on the quality of learning and the quality of the output?
Thank you very much. Do I agree that the ones there are the ones that are probably not the very best? And my answer to that, or my perception to that, is that it is not true. We still have very strong and qualified lecturers that are supposed to impart knowledge to our students. In our own case, what we have done, or what we are doing in University of Benin, and I'm sure in most other universities, is that we try as much as possible to encourage them to have networking by attending programs, short-term programs, training programs, as well as attending conferences and workshops, so that we can sharpen their tools. Again, I am sure that for most universities, we have ways of measuring input or output from the lecturers. We also have assessments that are done objectively, not subjectively, because some of these persons are externally assessed. So I think we still have the crop of qualified lecturers in the system. But that is not to say in every society, of course, just as you have the good ones, you have the ugly and the bad ones. There are there. But we try as much as possible to encourage individuals. Those who we find in our universities that become redundant, most times we actually advise that it's either they take up some type of training to enhance their teaching qualities and capabilities, and if they don't do that, I know since I came on board, I've had to advise certain few lecturers who actually went on training and they are not moving forward with their program to either return back or exit the university, because we don't think that such persons actually are teachable and so cannot then impact to students. So we have our own ways of assessing the output of our lecturers, which we are doing and will continue to do. And also, like I said, we also encourage them to develop themselves. And like my senior colleagues also know, that we have external assessment of some of these lecturers, especially when they get to the professorial cadre. So we have all of this put in place, and it's working. So I don't quite agree that, yes, we have the very bad ones, and that is why they agitate. That is not for me to discuss here. ASU has its own issues and with the government, and so they are driving that. But we still have the good ones among them, like, again, to emphasize that just in every society where you have the good ones, you also have the few bad ones, and we try as much as possible to purge those ones out once we get a notice of such persons.
So Lillian, before we let you go, let me just put this to you again, because most Nigerians are out there waiting and watching to hear exactly what the solutions are, which you have preferred, or what we have come up with on this 2-hour program this morning. Let's get back to the supervision issue. That's key, because it is, as Professor Ishak said, it's the difference rather between the performance at the private and then the public schools. In your opinion, what should be done about that?
Sorry, I didn't get that. I'm so sorry.
Talking about, what's your opinion on supervision, which is more or less lacking in public schools?
Breaking. Oh, I want to believe that you're talking about monitoring. Because it's breaking. I'm not hearing you. I'm so sorry. I'm not hearing you.
Go ahead. If you heard that, we're talking about monitoring and supervision in public schools as compared to private schools.
Again, what is the question? The question is not there.
Well, what I'm saying is supervision or monitoring of teachers is the key to success in teaching and learning, most especially. And it seems as if private schools seem to have an edge over the public schools in this regard. What should be done in the public schools in order to measure up in this regard?
Definitely, we know that monitoring is a major key to the success, because which is, of course, a way of assessing the output of teachers. Like Prof. earlier on said, for public schools, we used to have them come in, but now there are, problems with monitoring, supervision of. So we must encourage monitoring to come back to, part of assessing the output of our teachers. And so we need to encourage more monitoring, we need to encourage more supervision, because that is the key to at least amending areas that the teachers are falling short of in terms of, the output that we expect from them. So we need to encourage a lot of that. But like we said, we have issues with that. You cannot monitor when you don't have the resources to do that, when you don't have avenues of monitoring. So we need to empower our monitors, our inspectorate division of the ministries, so that they can effectively monitor our staff, especially in public schools, really.
Okay, Professor Salami, thank you very much. I would like to escalate this, the issue of monitoring to another level, partly what Professor Oloyede raised, and that has to do with oversight bodies. And the question is going to Professor Peter Okebukola, former Executive Secretary of the NUC. Professor Okebukola, I'm not quite sure what the numbers are now, but certainly at independence, I wouldn't know how many of these oversight bodies that we have. Today, we have the NUC. The NUC has been in existence now for a couple of decades, certainly not there at independence. You have quite a number of them that have also been involved. UBEC is there. JAM came on in 1977, conducting his first exam in 1978. Now, some persons would argue that, okay, these oversight bodies are intended to ramp up supervision and monitoring. But what has been our experience? How can we best maximize the intendment in setting up these bodies, rather than just having an escalating bureaucracy that sometimes doesn't quite deliver on the results?
Thank you very much. What we must do is to continue to strengthen the organizations, AUC, MBT, NCC, and other regulatory agencies. Strengthen them in terms of the capacities of those who are operating in those institutions. Strengthen them in terms of funding to implement their oversight or quality assurance activities. So those are the two main ways. Now, I must jump into what Professor Salami said regarding the quality of our staff, of our professors. Now, I'm going to assert that Nigerian professors, even today, are among the best in the world. They are among the best in Africa, at least. If you go to conferences, if you look at the research output, you find Nigerian professors are doing very well. Her Excellency Ambassador Miriam Katago, when she was in Unesco, she will confirm, she's now the Minister of State for Trade and Investment, she will confirm that when Nigerian professors, take the floor at UNESCO, others like WHO and everywhere, you find that we are really good. And to end up, I know we don't have time, I must thank God for blessing Nigeria with one man who came, since we are talking about regulatory agencies, who came as Executive Secretary of the National Universities Commission. And that's Professor Abubakar Adamu Rashid. And we have what we call the Rashid Revolution, which has taken off. The Rashid Revolution is encapsulated in this blueprint. This, in my view, is the master key to solving most of the challenges that are facing Nigeria today. So all stakeholders must be part of implementing or ensuring that this Rashid Revolution takes effect. So our regulatory agencies must be strengthened to be able to deliver on their mandate. And one last point is that there should be the regulator of regulators, in quotes, some people who will quality assure, the regulators, measure them on some standards and rank them so that there's some competition in delivering on their mandate. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor. It's our pleasure of giving us this great insight, and we thank you for being there. Professor Ishak, we really want to have your parting shots and your last thoughts in 30 seconds.
Thank you very much. I think there should be synergy among the various establishments in the education sector. There appears to me, if there must be NUC, there must be MBT, there must be NCC. They should not be standalone the way it appears to me. There should be a platform through which those regulate. For instance, in Ghana, you have just two, or they call one National Council for Tertiary Education, which performs the tertiary education, the supervisory education across what we call MBT, NCC, and UBT. Yes, and they have the second one, which is Accreditation Board. These two supervisory and regulatory roles are being played in segment by these three agencies. I believe they should synergize more.
We thank you so much, Professor Ishak. And we thank you so much also, Professor Okebukola, and there's Salami from Benin. That's Good Morning Nigeria for today. Do join us again tomorrow for another edition. I am Yusuf Nadabo Usman.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolo. Stay safe and be well. Tomorrow is October the 1st, Nigeria's Independence Day. Nigeria will be 60 tomorrow. See you then.